Good afternoon, it's Gary Sly and the Legacy of Handmade Objects. Glad to be back in front of the camera for a few minutes this week. I kind of skipped out on you last week and showed you a video of the Lake County Fair that was here in the local area, and hope you enjoyed some scenes from that. I was pleased to know that there were a lot of entries this year. And that has been increasing quite a bit over the last couple years. I saw a beautiful quilt today made by a high schooler that was just wonderfully wrought, and just is a real good sign that there are young people who are picking up some of these handcrafts and working on them as well. So as always, I encourage you, when you have local fairs or exhibits or quilt shows or whatever they may be, that you consider entering your work and being a part of it, if for no other reason that it begins to show people that there's still a vibrant community around us. I had a hectic few days. I have an uncle who lives up in Virginia who's turning 92 in July, and he had to have emergency surgery on Saturday morning. So I zipped up to Virginia on Friday, spent the day Saturday with him, and drove back to Florida yesterday, kind of a whirlwind. The good news is that he's doing quite well, was already up and moving around yesterday and eating vigorously, and he's on his way home today. And it looks like he'll be okay. He has been living alone and taking care of himself quite successfully, and probably with an aide coming in and checking on him every so often, he'll continue to be good. So I'm glad that that worked out nicely, and that we still have him in our lives for whatever period of time he may outlive me. So I'm happy that that went well. It kind of ties into something I want to talk about a little bit today, because it's been on my mind a good bit. I graduated undergrad from the University of Virginia, and they have an alumni magazine that comes out every so often, and I must admit I don't usually ponder it too closely, but there was a really good article in the most recent UVA magazine about the value of social connections and friendship, and how hard in our current society that is to develop. I can remember when I was in college, and when I was a young man beginning my career, and then later when was having a family and had children, it was fairly easy to make connections and get to know people. I'm fundamentally an introvert. During the pandemic, I was quite happy to sit in my chair at home and stitch all day and never talk to anybody. But even then, I understood the value of social connection. It is really quite imperative that whoever we are and at whatever age we may find ourselves, that we continue to try to find friendships and social connections that will sustain us. It does more than just give us a good feeling. It actually has physical, emotional, quite fundamental effects on us if we lack social connection, or if we have good, strong friendships and social connections. And when you think about it, we may have fallen in love and been married. We may have had parents. Well, obviously we had parents. We may have had children. And those connections are immensely important to us. But some of the connections that last throughout our lifetime are those of friendships. My 50th high school reunion is going on in a couple weeks. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to make the trip back up to Virginia for that. But I still have friends from high school that I connect with. And what the article did was really kind of try to spur people to think a little bit more about developing social connections and friendships, no matter what your age. It may get harder as we get older, but the benefits impact our health, our well-being, and even the success we have in moving along. There is one study that suggests that having good friends even helps to slow the aging process. Now, wouldn't we all like to think about friendships from that standpoint? The article goes on to talk about the pressures that make it difficult for us to be able to make friendships today. Technology, of course, gets in the way of that and takes the place of social interaction sometimes. We all, at whatever age we may be, even as retirees, find time to be difficult. And of course, as I mentioned before, the pandemic really had an impact on how we thought about interacting with people and making friendships. They focus on the idea that some of us really do best with one or two really close friendships. I would say that probably distinguishes me, even though I'm blessed to say that I have tons of friends all over the world. But there are a few connections that are particularly important to me. Others who are quite extroverts like large social groups, and they're kind of the social butterflies who work their way through a group and get to know everybody. It's important to remember that our friends are not perfect. They're not going to meet all of our needs. That's no reason not to extend and expand our circle of friends, because different kinds of friendships meet different kinds of needs. And it gives some thought to where we can encounter friendships and how we can build social connections. But there's no question, as I think about it, and I'm going to reflect a little bit on how things here on the shop in just a minute, there's no question that having friendships and social connections is valuable. Even the little daily encounters that we have when we stop in the grocery store, when we go to the bank, gives us a chance to have positive social interactions, and there are positive physical, emotional effects from that. Sometimes just having a little child sitting in a grocery cart smile at us and wave is enough to give us some endorphins and make us feel better about the world. Social anxiety and fear of being around people has heightened in recent days. There's a lot of tension in the world. There's a lot of mistrust of each other that makes that difficult. Again, I don't want to belabor the pandemic, but it helped to add to that, those barriers that tend to separate us from each other, which makes it even more imperative that we try to find some ways of connecting with other people. Here's an interesting statistic. This is research done at the University of Kansas. It takes about 50 hours of interaction to make a casual acquaintance into a friend. And this is not a bosom friend that you know everything about. This is just somebody that you can exchange conversation with. It takes 50 hours to develop something like that. It takes as much as 200 hours to become close friends with someone. And that is an investment. That's a way of building for the future at whatever age we may be, of thinking about connecting and making friendships with other people. Now, here's where I want to kind of tie it into the experience that I have here in the shop, because I really do think I have a unique opportunity here to think about social connections and friendship and how that all works. You've heard me mention that I have groups here in the shop almost every day of the week. The most frequent group, and the one that has lasted the longest, is a Thursday stitching group that actually began in June of 2020. This was a group of ladies who couldn't find a place to meet because many of the libraries and public areas had been closed. And in a very safe environment, they were able to come together in my old shop building and meet. And they've been here pretty much every Thursday since June of 2020. So we're coming up on the 6-year anniversary of that group. I have a youth stitch, I have knitters and crocheters, I have larger events like the one-day retreats across the street. Frequently, when people are talking about signing up for something like a retreat, there are people who will say, well, I'm kind of shy. That sounds kind of overwhelming to me. That sounds really difficult. What I think is significant and what I think is worth thinking about is groups like this are groups of people who have common interests. And even if you're shy, or even if you tend to have a bit of anxiety, just being able to talk about something that we know about in common is one of the easy ways to become friends with somebody. The other thing too about stitching groups and any kind of handmade groups is that people get to concentrating and you don't even have to talk at all sometimes. You can just focus on your work, bring that needle up and down, or do the knitting or whatever it is you're working on, and you really don't have to stress it. And I really can't stress how valuable I think these kind of groups are. The Wednesday night group, which is Slow Stitchers, has very quickly become a place of refuge, I think. It's a place where folks can come and maybe escape some of the pressures or struggles that are going on in other aspects of their lives. Yeah, we will occasionally drink a glass of wine or have a little snack here. Sometimes people bring donuts. We indulge ourselves a bit. But the main thing is getting together with like-minded folks. We don't get into politics. We don't stress about whose religious icons you may be interested in. We try to stay away from stuff like that. We give people a chance to vent their frustrations sometime, and it's okay to feel bad or feel grumpy when you get here, but I guarantee you probably won't still be grumpy when you leave. And I would say to folks maybe who are struggling to find social connections, that might be an avenue that you might pursue. I would even say, and I think this is true, that sometimes even an online group through Zoom or whatever technology may be available is another way to make connection. Obviously, it's not quite as good as sitting in a chair next to somebody, but some folks are really quite isolated. Maybe they're caregivers or there's something going on that prevents them from being able to go out and actually physically be in contact with other people. Online groups are another option, and I know that people form some pretty close bonds through those. My Weavers Guild, Weavers of Orlando, has a study group that meets at least once a week, and the teacher is working them through all the different drafts and ways that weaving is done over the course of quite a few weeks. And I know that the folks who are part of that become a part of a social group of its own. The Embroidery Guild of America, which I've been quite active in the last few years, has virtual chapters. And those are groups that represent people from all over the world. Actually, you don't even have to be in the United States. You can connect in when they have groups or when they have other online activities. If you want to just sit and listen, you can do that. If you want to interject or ask questions, it's another opportunity. I would say almost any of us would probably benefit from making new connections and finding ways to create new friendships. It's a real blessing to me to realize how many people I have become friends with and have had acquaintances with in the 6.5 years or so that I've had this shop. I'm able to build on all those other activities that I had the rest of my life, and those friends are still there. But this is a community here that comes and goes quite frequently, and I'm able to see and recognize and ask about their grandchildren and make sure they're traveling safely when they head back north and all the rest of that. It enriches me. It gets me out of my little box and out of whatever frustrations I may be having. And when there are issues in my life, that community is incredibly supportive and caring of me and what happens. I had a little bit of a frustration a few months back, 6 or 8 months back. Somebody hacked my email, and they used the email to send out a message to everybody that I had fallen and broken my femur. Now, it happened to be the day before one of my big retreats across the street. And I was in a panic. Of course, it took about an hour to get it straightened out and get the person blocked out of my email and all that. But immediately I began getting emails from folks who were concerned. Oh my goodness, how did you break your leg? And people were asking how they could help, which was endearing, I've got to say. The way you knew that it was spam is that if you replied to the email, the next email asked for a gift card, and my friends know that I would never have done that. So it actually got cleared up fairly quickly. But one of my best friends here in Leesburg actually showed up across the street at the church where the retreat was going to happen, because she said, you know what, if you broke your femur, I bet you're still going to be over there working, and I'm going to come help. So, you know, unexpectedly, something that was quite frustrating and quite frankly a little bit scary there for an hour or so, turned into another way for me to see how the connections around us really matter. So my advice to you is that wherever you may be and at whatever stage you may be in your life and in the relationships around you, that you always look for ways to strengthen the social connections and make new friends. You know, I notice sometimes with the various groups that meet here that sometimes when somebody new comes in, maybe they kind of rub folks the wrong way just a little bit. Maybe they're frustrated with their life, or maybe they are very sad because they've lost a spouse or something like that. And it can be kind of hard for the rest of the group to integrate them because they really bring a lot of negative energy. But the nice thing I notice is that in most cases, those rough edges begin to be kind of rubbed off as the person hangs in there and becomes a part of the group. So I would say, if you're about to start meeting or trying to make new friends, try to be aware and maybe don't try to turn people away the moment you open your mouth. But at the same time, all of the folks who came here under those circumstances really needed this. And the value of the social connection helped to smooth out some of those rough edges and gave them an opportunity to feel better about themselves. And so there is immense value, and there's immense research and studies and all the rest that tell us that friendships and connections are important. I hope in a very small way that some of you have been able to receive some help and some connection from what I do here. It's easy to sit in front of this camera pretty much every week and not know whether anybody gains any benefit from it or not. I do get some interaction, but I realize for the most part we just kind of watch and go on to the next thing. But I hope that you feel that whatever little connection we make is of value as well. But begin to look for opportunities. Begin to look for like-minded folks. Begin to look for folks who have some of the same experiences and background that you do. And that makes the difficulties of creating friendships go a little more smoothly, because then you have things in common. I'm going to stop for now. I'm still looking forward to take you on a tour next door here in the new shop. We've got Bike Fest coming here in Leesburg, so it's going to be a crazy time over the next 5 or 6 days. And lots of things going on around here, so I'll try to keep you up to date. But go out there and try to make some connections and build some friendships today. As always, this is Gary Sly, and it's the legacy of Handmade Objects.